Today, we're talking about the latest contract update around Josh Giddey. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Bazelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we're talking about the latest update around Josh Giddey. So we're going to be looking at three different sources that talk about the latest update with Josh Giddey. And so I wanted to go ahead, talk through each source, and then really tie everything together. And so we're going to be looking at what Brett Siegel had to say in Clutch Points. We're also going to be taking a look at what Bobby Marks had to say on ESPN. And then lastly, just talking about what K.C. Johnson had to say on his Fast Break show. And so let's go ahead. Let's jump into the first source here. And so this is Clutch Points. This is Brett Siegel. And so if you want to read this, you can check it out under this article title. I think it's a great piece if you're trying to find out just really what is going on around the NBA in restricted free agency here. And so this is what he had to say about Josh Giddey. And so he says that although they held firm on their offer of around $20 million per season, the Bulls have recently increased their proposed contract to try and end this stalemate. Chicago has presented Giddey and his representation with a 4-year contract in the ballpark of $85 million to $90 million, league sources said. And then Brett Siegel also says that this is likely the last contract proposal the Bulls will offer this offseason, and it's essentially a compromise from what both sides wanted, whereas the Bulls entered the summer wanting to keep Giddey on a deal around $20 million per season, and he wanted to be paid close to $30 million per year. And so I think that the key out of this is just really that first line where it says this is likely the last contract proposal the Bulls will offer this season. And so we'll talk about that here in a moment. And so the next update comes from Bobby Marks. And so if you guys want to read about this, you can head over here to Bleacher Nation. This is written by Elias Schuster. And so he does talk about what he says at the first part of the video. So he actually takes the quote out of that, but then he talks about this a little bit more. So a great piece to read on what Bobby Marks had to say. And so we're going to be looking at what he first said. And so if you want to see this video, you can go over to ESPN's YouTube page, and right at the 1338 mark, this is where he talks about Josh Giddey. And so he says this at the start, where he says that he was offered 4 years, $80 million before free agency started. That number has gone up to 4 years, $88 million. And he also says that that number is still in the bottom of starting point guards here. And if you're the Bulls, who just committed 5 years, $90 million to Patrick Williams on a lesser body of work, now you're all of a sudden drawing a line in the sand as far as where you are with Josh Giddey here. Now, Bobby Marks does also go on to say this. He says that, you know, it's a matter of how you value Josh Giddey. And he says, sign him to point guard money if you think he's the point guard of the future. And so he does say, like, I'm not saying you go out and you give him Emmanuel Quickly type of money, but he does say this: if you sign him to the $28 million, a 3 to 4 year deal. He says that that's a good value moving forward. He does mention that it's not something that is going to eat up a lot of the cap. I think he says 15% there. And that he also says this, that as time goes along, if that contract number doesn't go up as far as, you know, what he would be making, you know, per year, he feels like that he could be a guy that could take the qualifying offer. And so that is something that Bobby Marks says towards the end here. And so that's Bobby Marks. And so now moving into what K.C. Johnson had to say. And so K.C. Johnson said this on the Fast Break show. And he said that, look, there's a long-term deal on the table, and it's right around $20 million. So he says that the Bulls have something there. and that he does expect that the Bulls and Josh Giddey are going to get something done. In fact, he feels very optimistic about it. He feels that something will get done here in September. And he also said that, look, the Bulls are just not interested in a sign and trade. And so he does say that. I think we've heard that before from Casey Johnson. And he also said this too, like this situation that's going on with Josh Giddey is completely different from the Lauri Markkanen situation. And so that is one of the things that he pointed out. And then, lastly, he talks about the scenario of him taking the qualifying offer. And he says this, like, if he does take the qualifying offer, he would be able to, veto trades. Well, that's number one. We've talked about it here. And then number two, if he does, get traded, essentially he's going to give up his bird rights. But he says that if he does come out of restricted free agency, with just the way the cap is set to, be in the 2026 season or the 26 season, he's still saying that the Bulls would be able to offer him the most because they would have his bird rights. And also, too, they can put the extra year on the contract. I believe he said 5. And so that is what Casey Johnson said, sounding a bit more optimistic, than I think the first couple. But, now tying it together and just really, the thoughts here. And so I think that, one of the things too that I forgot to mention that I think is very important is that you just wonder, how is Josh Giddey going to come in after this situation is taken care of? Because, if it's a bitter kind of negotiation, obviously he's not going to be happy. And I think that certainly is going to impact his play. And so, you're hoping that that is not the case with whatever happens. And so I think that is one point to think about. Number two, when you look at these numbers and things like that, definitely you see that the Bulls, it seems like, are going to definitely have a little bit of a compromise because they are going to go slightly over the 20 million. But I do feel like that at the end of the day, to get this deal done, it's going to have to be something that maybe goes up and is a little bit closer to the 30 million. And so maybe 24, 25 is going to be the sweet spot. And so just going into what Bobby Marks said there, with just that 26, $28 million for 3-4 years, he feels like that's a good deal. And so let's see if the Chicago Bulls ultimately decide to go up here. And I think that, just another deciding factor as to how this thing plays out is just really the update that we heard around the other restricted free agents. Because right now, at the time of this recording, Cam Thomas went ahead and took his qualifying offer of $6 million. And so he was really the first domino to fall, so to speak, in restricted free agency. And then that also opens up some space for the Nets too. So they can still do some things here if they want to. And so let's see how they play that out. And then with Jonathan Kuminga, I don't think he's going to sign, another contract here with the Golden State Warriors as far as a long-term contract. I mean, when you read that report with Brett Siegel, it sounds like that he's headed definitely for the qualifying offer. And then when you look at Quentin Grimes, he's a player that, I wonder about. I mean, I think for them, as it's explained in the article, really they're trying to figure out how to maneuver money so they don't run into an apron there. But I mean, he very much could be on the table for taking the qualifying offer. And so let's see what happens, if all 4 players end up taking the qualifying offer. But I do believe that Josh Giddey is going to have the long-term deal out of this. And I think it is going to probably be a deal that it goes up a little bit more than the $22 million that, reports are out there saying. So I think it's going to be right around like 24, 25 million that's going to get it done. But let's see what happens. You guys let me know in the comments. Do you think that Josh Giddey is going to get a long-term deal that is going to be in that $24, $25 million range? Or do you feel like he's going to take the qualifying offer and stick around with the Bulls and just play it out and see what happens in free agency? And so I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And as we always say, look, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.